In this lesson, we're going to be adding user session functionality to our application. This will give us the ability to log in, log out, and create secure pages for our application. To add this functionality, we're going to be using the Flask extension called Flask Login. Flask Login provides all of the login, logout user session functionality and allows you to just plug in your user class for it to work. To get started, let's go to our shell and let's install the extension. So let's go make sure your virtual environment's activated, and then we'll go pip install flask-login. This will install the Flask Login extension. You can see I already have it installed, but the command should work for you. And then next we're going to register our extension with our application. So to do that, we'll switch over to our code. And we're going to go into our extensions.py file, just like we did with our SQL Alchemy extension. And right here, we're going to import the package, and then we'll instantiate the class for the Flask login package. So we'll go from Flask_login import login manager. Make sure there's two lines there. There we go. And then we want to go login. Oops. Next line. We want to go login_manager. Make that equal to the instantiated login manager. Okay. And then hit save for that. And then next we want to add this to our register extensions function call within our application factory. So we're going to go to our init file. And then within our init file, we need to import our extension, and then we need to register it with our application. So let's go to extensions here, and we'll go login manager. So that'll import for us, and I'll grab that. And we'll go down to our register extensions function call. And then we're going to initialize it within our extensions function call. So we'll go, oh, actually that's not right. Login manager.init app, and then pass it the app parameter. So this is the exact same way that we initiated, or rather registered the extension for SQL Alchemy. We're doing the exact same thing. We imported our login manager, our object from the login manager extension, and we're just passing it the app function so that it'll initialize for our application. So hit save for that, and that should register our extension. So now we just need to do a little bit of setup so that our extension will work with our user model. To do this, we need to add two additions to our init file, specifically to our register extensions function. We need to set the login view for the login manager, and we also need to give it a function that fetches the user that's been defined for the login process. So that sounds a little confusing, but we'll put it together and then we'll discuss what it means. So we'll go login manager, and this has property of login view, and we're going to set this property to reminders.login. Now this is just our blueprint and our view. Now this view doesn't exist yet, but we'll create it shortly. And then down another line, and we're going to define a function with a decorator. So the decorator is going to be login manager.userLoader, or rather, yeah, no, that's right, user loader. And then we're going to define the function under it called load user _ID. And this is going to return a query for the user. So we'll go query get user _ID. Okay. So let's just add our formatting. Looks like that's good. Okay, so again, we've set our login manager login view setting to the reminders.login view. And again, this is our blueprint and our view. And then we've created a function, or we've defined a function using this decorator, which is basically just saying for the login manager, set the user loader to this function. And this function is just returning our user using our user model. And we're just querying off of it and passing the user ID. So let's save that. And we have one last thing to do to configure the login manager. We need to go to our user model. So we'll go into models.py. And we need to add a mix into our user model. This will just add it'll add some functionality and some fields to the user model that the login manager expects. So first, let's import our mix in. So we'll go. Let's move up. Actually, we'll go from Flask_login import user mixin. There we go. And then we want to add that mixin to our user model. So we'll go down here, we'll go comma space, and we'll just add it like that so that it includes the user mixin to our user model. If you're not familiar with mixins, it's probably a good idea to stop right now and just do a quick read up. You can Google Python mixins and it'll give you a good idea how it works. But it's basic inheritance, and it's just going to inherit the functionality from this user mixin class. So that looks good for configuring our login manager. Next we need to, let's create our form. We're going to create a form for logging in. So let's go to our forms file, and we'll go down below our reminder form. Go 2 lines down. Let's define a new form class. We'll call it login form. Make sure it inherits the form base class, and it's going to have a couple fields. We're gonna have an email field. This is going to be a string type field. We'll call it email, or rather the label will be email. And we're going to add some validators. So for this one, we're going to, we want to make sure it's an email format, and we also want to make sure that it's required. So let's go v.input required, and then we want to go v.email. So again, that's just 2 validators, one saying this field is required, and one saying that we should expect an email format for the string that's going to be passed. So let's go down another line, and we'll define the next field, which is password. And this is going to be, although it's a string field, it's technically going to be a password field. And this is going to take the password, it'll be a password for the label, and then we're going to add some validators. And for the password validators, we're just going to do input required. Other than that, we don't overly care. And then we're going to go down one more line, and we're going to go submit. We'll make that equal to submit field, and we'll just make it login. So that looks pretty good. It looks like our linter's complaining, undefined name password. Okay, so we just need to import. Let's go up here and go password field. Ooh, that's getting pretty close. Let's pretty close to our 80 limit, our 80 character limit. Okay, so we'll go like that, and we'll just hit save and see how that goes. Okay, it looks like it cleared that up. Okay, so that looks like that's good for our form. Our form for our login is going to take an email and a password. It's a pretty standard form. And then we're going to have a submit button to submit the form. So next, let's create our login view, the one that we defined for our login manager. So we'll go into views. We might as well import our form while we're at it, since we just created it. So we'll go login form. So that's adding the login form. It's complaining because we haven't used it yet, but that's okay. So let's go down past the delete view, a couple lines down, and this is where we're going to define our login view. So let's start with our root. So we'll go reminders.root, and we'll keep it nice and simple. It'll just be /login. And this is going to take, let's see here. So the login will take a get and a post. So we'll go get post. Now this is because we want to be able to load the login page with a get request, and then we want to be able to submit the login form with a post request. So next, let's define our function. So we'll go down the line, define login, and that'll take no parameters actually, and then we're going to I'll just fill out some of the logic, and then maybe we'll just go over it briefly. So we'll go, let's define our form, go login form, and this is going to take request.form. So then we want to validate our form if the form has been submitted. So let's go if request method is equal to post and form is valid. So now if the form is valid, we want to query the user for the submitted form. So we'll go user is equal to user query filter by email, and that would be equal to the form email field data, and we want the first. So then if we have a user, we want to go if user. So if the user exists that they submitted their email for and their password for, we want to go check password form, and we want to pass it the form password data. So if this conditional check is true, we want to log in our user. So we'll go login underscore user, and we'll pass the user object. And then if it's not, then we need to indicate that it's not by using a flash message. We'll go wrong email or password. And this is going to be a danger type message. And then we want to return a redirect. So we'll go redirect URL underscore 4. And we want to go reminders dot login. Otherwise, if we get to this point, we just want to render out our template. So render template. And we want to pass it a login template, which again, we don't have created yet, but we'll create shortly. And we want to pass along the form parameter. Okay, so you can see our linter is complaining, so let's go and make sure that everything's working. So we haven't imported our model, our user model, and we haven't imported this login user helper function. So let's do that. The user model we know about, we just haven't added it yet, so we'll go user. But the login user function is a new one. That's a function, like a helper function that's been provided by Flask login. So we'll go Flask login import login underscore user. And we'll hit save on that. Let's check it out now. And it looks like the linting errors are gone. Okay, so let's talk about what we've done here. So we've defined a new view. We've set it to the login route. We've constrained it to get and post requests. And then we defined our login view function. Within this function, we instantiate our form and we pass it the request form parameter, which is going to be the submitted form data from the request object provided by Flask. And then we check if the request method is post, which means if the form was submitted. And then we check as well if the form is valid by validating it. Now, if this conditional is correct, it's going to query the user for the email address that they submitted. If that user exists, that means it's a valid user. We also check the password that they submitted using the check password helper method that we included on our user model in the previous video. We pass it the password that's been passed within the form, and we check to see if that password matches the password for that user. If that's the case, if that conditional is true, we log in the user. So at this point, they've submitted an email address that is accurate, and they've submitted a password for that email address for that user that matches. So we go ahead and log in the user. And this login user function is provided by the Flask login extension. Otherwise, something was wrong. So either they didn't, the email was wrong, so the user didn't exist, or the password that they included for the user was inaccurate. Either way, we want to flash them a message saying, wrong email or password. We don't want to tell them which, because we don't want them to know what was wrong. We want to set it to danger type so that when we render it on our template, they know that, or rather Bootstrap will add the appropriate classes. And then we want to redirect so that this flash message will show up. And for the redirect, we just want to redirect right back to our login so that they can try logging in again if maybe they added the wrong password or something. And then otherwise, if we get to this point, we can redirect, we can render our login template that'll include our login form. Now I'm just realizing that I forgot a couple lines. So what happens here is after the check password, we go to log in our user. After our user is logged in, we don't just want to render the login template, we want to redirect to the application, to the index of the application, so that they can continue using the application as they had planned. So let's go under the login user, and let's also add a message, just so that we can say, like, you logged in successfully, everything's working as expected. So let's go logged in successfully, and then we'll go, that'll be success type. And then we want to redirect the same way that we're redirecting if it fails, but we're going to redirect to our index, to our actual, our main application page. So let's get the URL for that view, which is going to be reminders.index. There we go. Okay, so that looks good. Yeah, sorry about that. We want to make sure that we're redirecting afterwards. Otherwise, we'll just, even if you log in successfully, you'll just sit at the login page and never make it to the application. Now, while we're here, we might as well create our log out view as well. So let's go down a couple lines, and we're gonna define a new view. We'll call it, let's see here. We'll define the root, and we'll call it log out. And let's restrict this one to, let's see here. Let's restrict this to get requests, and then we'll define the function, which is going to be log out. Again, it's going to take no parameters, and this view is going to be really simple. It's just going to essentially log the user out. We don't need to submit any forms. We don't need to do any type of logic or anything like that. So we'll go log out user, just like we did the login user. And then we're going to return a redirect, and then we'll just redirect to the login page, which is a good secure way of handling it. So we'll go reminders.login. Okay, and we're going to have to import this function as well. So this is just the exact opposite of the login function. The Flask extension also provides you with a logout function. It looks like I forgot to add an S there too. There we go. Okay, so let's go up here, and we'll import the login, or rather the logout user function. Okay, there we go. So that looks like it's good. Again, that's pretty simple. We're just logging out the user, so we're just destroying the user session, and then we're just redirecting them back to the login page, which is a secure page, or rather it's a public page that we don't mind them being redirected to when they're not logged in. Now we have one more thing to do before we move out of our views file. Let's add security, secure login checkers for the views that we care about, the ones that we want to keep secure. So let's we need to import a decorator function from Flask login, and it's called login_required. So this is just a function that you can use to decorate your views, and it basically just makes it so that users can't log into that view, or rather users can't render that view unless they're logged in. And to apply that, you simply go to the view, go under the root, and you want to add as a decorator login required. And it's really that simple, which is kind of the benefit of using the Flask login plugin, or rather extension. So we want to add it to our index, which is where we're listing and adding all of our reminders. We want to add it to the delete reminders because we don't want people to be able to delete reminders without being logged in. So let's hit save on that. So next we need to create our login template so that we can render our login form. So let's go to the templates folder, and we'll create a new one. We'll call it login.html. And this is going to extend our base template. So to do that, we'll open up some template tags, or some functional template tags, and then we want to go extends base.html, just like we did in our index template. And now we also want to render a form, right? We want to render our login form, and to do this, we can use our trusty form macro. So we'll go from form_macros.html, import render_form. Actually, I just want to check something real quick. Let's go to our index template. Okay, yeah, that looks fine. I just want to make sure that I'm consistently using. There we go. That's just an OCD thing. Okay, so let's go back to our login template, and we want to go. We want to define our content block, which is what's going to show up, what's going to render within our content. So we'll go like this. and we'll close that block up. And then in here, it's going to be really, really basic. We just want to define a couple divs. We want to define a bootstrap row. Close that up. Within our row, we want to define a column. So we'll go call -8 div. And then we want to render our form. So we'll go open up some template tags, we'll go render underscore form, and that is takes the form object. There we go. So yeah, that's pretty much it. It's so easy because we already took care of a lot of the functionality with our form, our render form macro, which really again illustrates the benefit of doing that, abstracting it all into this one macro, which we can just use wherever we want. And just kind of, if we ever need to make changes, we can make changes to that render form macro. It's just a really clean way of doing it. It keeps your templates really clean, and it's reusable code, which is always good when you're programming. So this seems like a good time to stop and see if we've broken anything. What we'll do is we'll switch over. Let's switch over to Chrome and then check and see if anything's rendering. So we'll switch over here. We'll put in our IP address at our port 5000. Okay, let's see. So you can see that our login require is working. We got our Flash message that says please log in to access this page. This is provided by the extension, but that's good. It's rendering appropriately, which is great. But one thing seems to be missing is our password field. Now this is because when we created our form macro, we defined some conditional input checks, or rather some field type checks, I should say. And one of them was string, but we actually have a password field, which is technically a string field, but is also named a password field. So what we have to do is we need to go into our render macros, and we need to create one for our password field so that it renders appropriately. So let's switch back over to our editor. And in our editor, let's go to our form macros file. And remember, these are the conditionals, like if field type is equal to datetime field, that sort of thing. And we defined one for string field, but we want to add a check for password field, but password field is going to be treated exactly the same way as string field. So this is an easy one. So we go if field type is equal to string field, and we'll just add another parameter here. So we'll go or field type is equal to, one second. This probably ended up being slower. There we go. Okay, again, so if else if field type is equal to string field, or field type is equal to password field. Okay, and that'll just catch password fields as well. And as you build this out, if you start adding more form fields, you can add them here. Just add render functions if they're different, or just add to the conditional here to catch them this way. So let's hit save on that. And then we'll switch over to our Chrome tab. Let's see here. Okay, there we go. And then we'll refresh. Okay, so you can see our form field for password is rendering. Let's hit login with no credentials, and it looks like the errors are also rendering, which is great. So now we just need to test if our login views are actually working. So let's try logging in with some bad credentials and see if our errors are being caught. So let's go test at test.com, and we'll go test, hit login, and you can see wrong email or password. Now the layout's a little wonky, but I think the whole layout's wonky for this template, so what we'll do is we'll fix that after. So let's get rid of that. Let's try logging in with credentials that we know are correct. So let's go colin.morgan@fullbit.ca. Now this will be whatever you set it to in the previous video. And it was password, I believe. So we'll hit login. Okay, looks good. Logged in successfully. So we got our Flash message. It's successful. That's why it's green. And it logged us, or rather it redirected us to our index application page where we can handle our reminders and all the information, or rather see all the information for our reminders. Now let's try logging out. Log out. Okay, and it looks like it worked. I didn't get a Flash message, so maybe something is wrong. Oh, that's right. We didn't add a flash message. So let's do that real quick, just so that we're consistent. So we'll switch over to our editor. We'll just copy and paste this one down here. And we'll go log out. Log out. Actually, let's do you are now logged out. There we go. And we'll hit save. We'll switch back over. And let's just confirm that that whole workflow is working again. So we'll go colin.morgan at fullbit.ca, password, hit enter, logged in successfully. Now let's go to the log out view. Okay, you are now logged out. Okay, perfect. So that seems to be working. That means our authorization workflow is good. Our page is secure. And yeah, that's looking good. Now let's take a look at fixing some of the layout issues for this this login template. So it looks like the biggest problem is that it's not being wrapped in a container, and it seems to be extending. We set a column so it's not extending across the whole page, but we set a fairly large column so it's taking up most of the page. So let's switch over. Let's go to our base template and get an idea of what's going on here. Let's see here. I have a lot of tabs open. I'm just going to clean some of these up. Keep the login open, forms, models. Okay, there we go. So let's look at our base. In our base, we have a container. We have a row. And then within this row, we are doing our flash messages. Okay, and then outside the container, we're defining our content block. So what's happening is we're not wrapping our templates within a container. So when we didn't add a container to the login page, it's giving this kind of wonky layout. Let me think here. So I think what we'll do is we'll just wrap our login row in a container, and we'll call it a wash, because there's an argument for putting all of our content blocks within a container and just not having to redefine them. But we wanted to add some custom classes like this to certain ones and whatnot. So I think we'll just keep it really simple, and we'll just wrap this in a container. So let's go div class container. We'll add a login class just in case we want to do some styling. We'll go div. Might as well take advantage of having separate containers. So we'll hit save on that. Switch over to our tab. Okay, cool. So it looks like it definitely cleaned it up. It's still really big, so maybe we'll reduce the columns. I'll just do that without switching over. There we go. So what I did was I just reduced. Actually, I'll show you real quick. I just reduce call 8 here to call 4, and then that'll kind of shrink the login thing. Now it's not very intuitive. Maybe we can add some more markup here. Let's switch over. Let's go. Let's think here. Okay, so let's add a header. We'll go h2 login h2. Let's save. Switch over. Okay, that looks a little better. And then maybe some. Actually, maybe we'll put that. Let me think here. Maybe we'll just add. Let's add just a horizontal ruler. Save that. Just kind of playing around with it. Just want to see what'll look good or better than what it is. There we go. That looks a little better. We're not getting too deep into it. Obviously, you could spend hours doing this, and feel free to style it any way that works for you. Not to go all Bob Ross, but it can be your project, and make it what you want. Make changes where you want. Make it look the way you want. Change the colors. Play with Bootstrap. Just try and get into it. All right, so let's try logging in here. Colin.morgan. Actually, let's give it bad credentials or no credentials. Okay, that looks good. Test@test.com. Test. Okay, so that looks good. Get rid of that, and then we'll just try logging in again. At fullbit.ca. There we go. And password. Hit enter. Okay, that looks good. I'm pleased with that. I think we'll do a couple minor changes to our navigation, and then we'll call it a wrap. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up the Bootstrap navbar documentation. We're just get a feel for what we want to do here. So we know we want to add some navigation items. This looks like kind of the approach that we want to take here. So we'll just we'll use this markup kind of as a guide, and we'll switch over to our editor and just make these changes. So let's go over in our base HTML template. Let's make some changes to our navbar. We need to add the expand class so that it handles our navigation at mobile properly. So we'll just follow the markup that we just looked at. We'll just add this class navbar expand large, which means it'll expand the navigation bar at larger sizes. And then we need to add a class toggle, or rather a nav toggle. So we need to add a button, and that'll go navbar toggle. Actually, it might even just be faster just to lift this over like this. There we go. Okay, so this button will handle the toggling of our navbar. And then I think I'll just lift it again. I mean, we need exactly this, so we'll just make some changes. Like some formatting here. Okay, so let's see here. We have our navigation items, our navigation wrapper, our navigation item. The first one, let's get rid of active because that's not actually going to apply, which is home. Let's leave that. That seems to be fine. We'll get rid of this because we don't need that. And then our next one is going to be log in. And then one more is going to be log out. And we'll get rid of this one here, which we don't actually need. Okay, that looks like it's good. Let's hit save. And we'll switch over to our browser. Hit refresh. Okay, cool. So you can see the three items we just added. They're all links. They don't go anywhere yet, but we'll switch that, or we'll fix that here shortly. And I just want to check real briefly here how this looks at mobile. So let's open our developer tools. We'll click on this little toggle device toolbar, and you can see it just switched it over to mobile for us. So that looks decent. You click on this, and it gives you the buttons, which is great. Our table is a little funky, but I'm not sure there's anything we can do about that right now. We may address that here shortly in the future. Okay, so let's close that up, untoggle from the mobile layout, and then we'll switch over to our code. And we want to add some conditional checks. And we don't want our login and logout buttons both to show all the time. We want to show one or the other based on the status of the user session. So let's make that change next. Now, lucky for us, the Flask login extension provides us with a nifty little template variable called current user. And that's injected into our templates. Well, I guess not injected technically, but is made available within our template context so that we can use that to determine some of the logic. So what we'll do is we'll use that logic to determine which of these buttons to display. So let's use some template tags. We'll do a conditional check. So that variable I was talking about is current user, and then it has a property called is authenticated. And that's fairly self-explanatory. And then we want to do an else, and then we want to close up our if statement. Oops. Man, what a mess. There we go. And if. And we'll hit save. So this is just saying, if the user is authenticated, we have these backwards. Log out. There we go. Okay. So if the user is authenticated, show the logout button. Otherwise, show the login button. And then we want these to go to actual URLs other than just hashtags. So let's go like this. And we'll use our trusty URL for. And we want to get it for the reminders blueprint reminders. And this is going to be log out. And then we want to do the same thing for our login, except it's going to be for the login. There we go. So we'll hit save on that. And now let's switch over and see if it's working. So we'll go over to Chrome, and we want to hit refresh. It looks like everything's working. You can see there's only the logout, no longer the login. So that means it's probably working. We were already logged in, so we won't see the login one. So let's go, let's refresh one more time. Okay, so we'll go log out, and you can see it toggled back over to log in. We got our logout message, and we'll just log back in to make sure it's working as expected. Password, there we go. Okay, cool. So it looks like that's working. I'll flip down to mobile here real quick just so we can see. Okay, cool. And it works at mobile as well. Yeah, that looks good. I think that's where we're going to wrap up this lesson. This was definitely a long one. So let's commit our progress, and then that'll be the end. So we'll switch over to our shell. I'm going to go into a second tab here and go get status. Init. So we made lots of changes. Yeah, that all looks good. So we'll go get add and then get status. Looks good. Looks like it's staged. So now we want to set our get message, our get commit message, which is add user login and logout functionality. Okay, there we go. So like I said, that's it for this lesson. We added a new Flask extension, which is Flask Login, that handles our user session management for logging in, logging out, that sort of thing. It also allows us to create secure views, which is great. You can tell that it was a very easy, out-of-the-box way to kind of to get that type of functionality working. And I do want to mention that we didn't touch too much on how Flask Login works, simply because it could be its own series just discussing how that type of functionality works. But as a developer, you should definitely look into how your tools operate, how they work, and the technology that's used behind them. And in particular, user session management and security is something that you should spend a good deal of your time really reading into and understanding, so that you can work within the process and understand how it works, so that you can identify potential security issues for your application. In the next lesson, we're going to be configuring Celery to handle asynchronous handling of our reminders.